welcome back to my author commentary for A Prince of Song and Shade. Today is a fairly exciting day for me, even though we are up to chapter 30. As I'm recording this, it is the day after the release of Call of the Shadow Rift, book 1 of new series, Book of the Doom Shroud, and that's a sequel series to this very series here. So if you are someone who's watching these because you've read this series and you're happy if I have all the spoilers and you didn't know that there was a sequel coming out, Call of the Shadow Rift is out today. The story, or at least book 1 in the series, focuses on the protagonist Kyrie Venador. We left her at the end of A Tale of Stars and Shadows series, ruling Ahara of Montan by the skin of her teeth, with Methanis as her husband to bring the House Mananine behind her in order for her to win that throne. That's where we leave them at the end of A Duet of Sword and Song, and this story, Call of the Shadow Rift, picks that up 2 years later. It's a lot of fun to write. I'm excited to have it out in the world. I hope if you are going to pick that one up that you do enjoy it. But back to A Prince of Song and Shade. Again, chapter 30 today. Let me just bring up my notes because I was pretty clearly not organised enough today. Talyn is a busy little bee in this chapter. There's quite a few things she pops around getting done, so let's go through those. There are a few little things I'm keen to talk about and kind of illustrate a little bit further for you all. So Talyn arrives back in Mithraena after her father's funeral back in the Twin Thrones. She's feeling pretty low, understandably still quite grief-stricken over the loss of her father, but despite all that, quite buoyed by the fact that Corrin and Zamril, not only Corrin and Zamril with her that travelled all the way to be there at her father's funeral to support her, but that all the wolves had kind of come in behind them in doing that Theak by figuring out how to ask Prince Kyon to let them go. Halorn and Tierslin kind of stepping back and allowing Zamril and Corrin to be the one to go, and the rest of the wolves kind of putting in their wages to make sure that Zamril and Corrin could get there in time. So these are things she's kind of dwelling on and thinking on in the back of her mind at the same time she is feeling the grief that she's feeling, and those things are very much helping her. We get dropped straight back into the kind of the visceral nature of Mithraena, or at least Dock City, with the smells and the sights. Summer is hitting early. It's even more hot and humid than usual. The recent arrival of a shipment of fresh vegetables and fruit that the Shadowhawk tried to steal is kind of starting to rot in the streets. And there's the usual kind of sights and sounds and smells and stickiness that Talyn immediately kind of notices as soon as they step back into Dock City. She goes up to report back into Ravanier to let him know that he's back. He's an interesting character, Ravanier. He's been quite obstructive when it comes to Talyn since her very first arrival in Mithraena. He's clearly loyal only to Queen Serana. Yeah, he's not a bad dude at the end of the day. He's genuinely sad for Talyn at her father's death, and his kind of condolences are quite genuine, which she appreciates. It's in that meeting with him that she learns that Amrun Windsong has taken Iceflight's place and will be her new commanding officer. She has a lot of questions about this, but she's learned her lesson with Ravanier and doesn't bother asking them. She figures she'll find out for herself what Windsong is like once she gets up to the Skyreach. Part of her is quite curious to head up to the Skyreach to see this wonderful place that she's heard so much about, but mostly she's just disappointed that she has to leave Dock City. One of the things that's helping her with her grief is having her work to focus on, primarily coming back to Mithraena to figure out what that connection to vengeance is from the Shadowhawk, what she's promised to Sheer Thornhill that she will do. And she's kind of really looking forward to having that to focus on, having work to do that will help distract her from the grief that she's feeling. So to kind of arrive back in Mithraena and immediately have to leave and leave that behind is disconcerting to say the least. But Talyn is a tough cookie. So she resolves to do that. And like I said, is quite curious about her new commanding officer and looking forward to seeing what he's like. The conversation that she has with Raven is quite interesting too. He drops the tidbit that his investigations have revealed that he believes that Iceflight was blackmailing Goldfeather. There's never any kind of definitive answers later on in the series about exactly what happened that night with Goldfeather and Iceflight being murdered horribly by the Torn Cat. But the implication is pretty strong, and I'm happy to kind of confirm that Azralan is obviously behind those murders. Ice Flight, being Mathanas' man, did learn about the fact that Azralan was kind of manipulating Goldfeather into siphoning off some funds for Azralan's purposes. Ice Flight found out about that. He was blackmailing Goldfeather, and Azralan wanted to get rid of both of them so that neither of them could betray him to Mathanas. Obviously, Talyn doesn't know that yet, so she finds that snippet quite interesting, but isn't quite sure yet where to place it in the kind of wider tapestry of all the mysteries and questions happening in her landscape at the moment. She then has a conversation with Sarvan, who, as always, just shows up randomly out of the blue to try and get information out of her. There's quite an interesting little hint in this conversation between them where he basically comes out and says, if you want us to go, us, he means the shadows, if you want us to go hunt down your father's killers, just ask, just say the word. She's like, that's completely inappropriate. I'm not a Dumnorix member of court. I have no standing and no influence. I can't be ordering the Shadowhawk to do the shadows, to do anything on my behalf, and you shouldn't have even asked that. But that kind of offer, as subtle as it is and as interesting as it kind of makes that dynamic between them, that was deliberately planted there to, again, give another hint. Once you learn that Tarkos is behind all of this, obviously Sarvan is Tarkos' man through and through. He's there in Mithrena, acting entirely on behalf of Tarkos. And at this stage, Tarkos considers Talyn his future queen, a solid ally, and so he has Sarvan make that offer, because as far as Sarvan's concerned, whatever looks after Talyn looks after Tarkos' interests. But again, it's another little seed dropped in there, so when you do kind of get to the reveal, you can start going back and putting all those little pieces together. She then, for the most kind of gut-punchy part of this chapter, heads to the Shadowhawk's apartment, hoping to chat to him before she has to leave to go up to the Skyreach. To see what he's learned while she was away, to apologise for leaving so abruptly, and to see what they can put in place until she can come back. He's not there. The note that he left her, expressing his condolences for her father's death, is lying on the table, and it's kind of as she's kind of sitting there looking at the note that the light's coming through the window and casting shadows, and it finally clicks in her brain what's been nagging at her ever since the night of the fight in the alley against Vengeance, when they were ambushed by Vengeance. What she saw in that split second during the fight was Kewin / the Shadowhawk using his shadow magic to cloak himself and keep himself hidden, and she catches, when she replays that memory of the fight and what she saw in that split second, she sees him step out of the shadows in the sense of not just a normal person stepping out, but 1 minute the shadow is there and the next second it's gone like a cloak. And of course she immediately feels incredibly betrayed. But what's interesting is how hard this hits her. Yes, she's already pretty low from her father's death. She's still healing from Sari, but it's quite a strong reaction she has here to the idea that the Shadowhawk might not be who she thinks he is. Part of that goes to the fact that deep down, the real reason she's come back to Mithrena is in large part because of him and the work he's doing and her desire to help with that. And of course, if he turns out to be a shadow, to be an enemy, to be a betrayer, then all that was for nothing, and she was complicit to betrayal of her own country. But also part of it is how strongly she's come to feel about the Shadowhawk. She doesn't quite process why or understand it. I don't think it's quite subconscious at this point. But the fact that he might be a traitor, he might not be on her side, is another grief for her, because she's starting to really like the guy and feel quite strongly about him. So quite a strong reaction from her there. Again, understandable one, but I also think it's quite telling. And I think when she and Sari have that conversation in her head, Sari tries to calm her a little bit, but I think Sari kind of picks up on this depth of that emotion too, even though she doesn't. She's kind enough not to point it out in that particular moment. So yeah, busy bee was Talyn in this chapter. A few different things happening. We're now positioning to head up to the Skyreach. As those who have read the book already know, this is going to be quite an interesting part of the book. We've got the travel to Arater coming up and Kari Vanador appearing for the first time, although I'm not sure we actually get her on screen in this book as opposed to in the next book in King of Masks and Magic, but then obviously what happens after their return. So some great chapters coming up. I can't wait to get into them with you. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about these ones. If you have any questions or comments on this chapter or any of the previous chapters I've already talked about, please drop them in the comments below. Love to chat as always. Otherwise, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you for chapter 31. Bye.